Do you want to be able to do this? Are you looking for a melee-based poison rogue that can kill Duriel in one stagger like this? If so, I've got the build just for you today. And here you can see that I'm able to kill bosses with it. I'm able to do a tier 115 pit run with this. And I can easily farm lots and lots of pits very fast, T100s, as you can see here, with lightning fast clear speed, being able to simply walk up to the mobs, poison them, and then walk away before they even hit the floor. And this build excels at speedrunning. It is good at killing torment bosses as well as pushing pits, though it's not going to be quite as good as, say, Heartseeker and maybe some other really, really good pit pushing builds, but it can get the job done. But more importantly, it is a lot of fun, and it definitely scratches that melee rogue itch that you may have and want to be looking for. And this build is designed for a really fast pace and is able to farm for those pit materials really fast, being able to go through pits in about 2 to 3 minutes usually at T100 once you get this build rolling. And I've created multiple variations of this build, from being able to do pit pushes to killing bosses to speed farming, and I also have created a starter build so that you can easily gear up without too many requirements, and then it can easily transition into a more optimized build from there if you'd like. And while there are variations of the build, you don't necessarily have to use them. If you just want to pick one of the builds, either the starter build or the optimized build, they both can do everything just fine. But if you want to really try and push the limits, you've got the specialized builds with just a few changes to optimize those runs for you. Alright, so in this video, my goal is to help you get started with this build. There's a lot to this build as you get deeper and deeper into it. It's very easy to actually get started with the build once you got a few key pieces. And then later on, my plan is to make a few more specialized guides about the different variations and give you guys some tips and tricks on how to do different things in the game better. So for example, like bossing or pit pushing or speed running, things like that. But again, my goal here is to help you guys understand how this build functions and to help you guys get started so you can start collecting pieces, start trying out the build yourself, experimenting with it, things like that. Okay. So first off, what do we need for this build to get started? Well, the number one question I always get is, can I do this build without Andariel's Visage? The answer is no. You must have Andariel's Visage. This is the thing that does all of our damage. Pretty much all of our damage comes from this. If you don't have this, it doesn't work. So get this item. It is a uber unique. You can get uber uniques by farming the various bosses. The tormented bosses are probably your best bet, or using your sparks to craft it. So 4 sparks, you can craft this item. So once you have this item, then you can do this build. Okay. Now, what does this item do? Well, it's based on the lucky hit part, so it says up to a 20% chance to trigger a poison nova that applies about 18,000 poison damage over 5 seconds to enemies in the area. And that doesn't seem like a lot. 18,000 damage over 5 seconds seems kind of low, right? Like, how did I do so much damage with this? Well, in order to do a lot of damage with this item, we have to scale up the damage. Okay? And to do that, there's multiple different things that help us out. Okay? So first off, it's a lucky hit. So we have to score a lucky hit in order to proc this. And to do that, the main thing that is going to proc this is Puncture. This is our number one go-to skill for that. It is not Flurry, it is Puncture. And that is because Puncture has a pretty good lucky hit chance. You can see it's 56%. It's actually 35%, but the 56% includes all of my increased lucky hit chance, which is also very important. You'll notice on my gear, I take all the lucky hit possible that I can get. So I get on my gloves, 17.6%. On both rings, I have 14.7%. And on my amulet, I have 12%. If you're missing one or two of these, it's not that big of a deal. You'll be fine. But generally speaking, more lucky hit chance increase, the better. Okay. And then the other thing is that Puncture attacks 3 times. So each one of its 3 blades is going to have that 56% chance to lucky hit. So when I attack here, it splits off into 3 blades, and all 3 of those can proc Andariel. Now, 3 is pretty good, but you'll notice each time I actually attack 6 times. There's actually 6 blades, and that's because on my bow, I have that 115% chance to puncture projectiles to cast twice. Now, you really only need 1 Masterwork proc. I got unlucky and got a second Masterwork proc, so that was unfortunate, but you really just need 1 with a starting value of 59% on your bow. So you get 59% roll, and then get 1 Masterwork proc, and that will get you over 100%, so that every time you attack, you get 6 puncture blades. Now, the other thing is that the faster we attack, the more that we throw, the more often we're going to be able to proc Andariel's Visage. So you can see my attack speed is pretty decent. It's pretty fast here. But we want to scale that up further. And on my gear, I get some attack speed. I actually only want 1 attack speed roll on my gear somewhere. So here you can see I have that 10.2% attack speed roll on my ring, and I don't have it anywhere else. You can get this on your rings, you can get it on your gloves, you can even put on your amulet. You just need 1 of them somewhere. And then we also have attack speed with Andariel's Visage. And this is all we need in order to reach the attack speed cap, because we will be using Rapid as well, which gives us another 30% here, and as well as Flurry, which gives us 45% with combo points. So we do use combo points with this build, and that's because Flurry, when you get 3 combo points, gives us a 45% attack speed buff, which is really nice, really huge, gets us to that 100% attack speed cap in the first column. If you're not sure what I mean by that, I have this attack speed calculator here that I'll pull up here. So here's an attack speed calculator made by Sanctum with information from Ava, so thanks to them for that. And what this does is it allows us to figure out exactly how much attack speed we can get, as well as how much attack speed we need in order to reach certain breakpoints for different skills. So here you can see I'll be using Puncture, and then I use daggers, which have an attack speed, attacks per second of 1.2 seconds. And then here it tells me how many frames that I need in order to cast Puncture. So here I'm at 10 frames right now, so that means that every 60 frames is 1 second. So that means that I'm going to use Puncture 6 times per second. 10 frames, 60 frames per second. So I can cast a 60 divided by 10 6 times every second. Okay. And to get that breakpoint, you can see all the different things that I have. So I have Andariel's Visage at 14.5. The checkbox means that we get it. So close quarters combat gives us 15% and 15%, so 30%. One in what's called cap 1, and one it's called cap 2. There's actually 2 separate caps for attack speed, and each cap you can get up to 100% in. I know, it's kind of confusing, but hang in there. Okay. And then we will be using the Elixir of Advantage 2, which gives us 15%. And then Flurry combo points gives us 45%. And then on one of the rings, we'll have the 9.3%, 10%, somewhere around there. And then Rapid being 30%. And with that in mind, we end up having 45% in cap 2, 98.8% in cap 1, which gives us 10 frames. If I was to go down just a little bit, so like for example, let's say my ring here only had say 7% attack speed on it. Well, now I am at 11 frames, and it tells me that I need 2.3% more attack speed in order to reach that next breakpoint of 10 frames. So you can use this calculator. I'll put a link to it in the description if you want to check it out. It is very, very useful. All right, so with that in mind, we can see that when I attack here and I use Flurry, we can see that I attack quite a bit faster here. And if I then use my Elixir of Advantage 2, okay, then this is going to allow me to get to that next breakpoint here as well. So this thing is actually huge. Yeah, this is a huge increase in our damage. Make sure you pick some of these up. Okay. So now if I start attacking here, use Flurry, we can see I just attack insanely fast with that Flurry and Elixir up. And then we can start getting some pretty big numbers here. Now, once we've scaled up our attack speed, we've scaled up our lucky hit chance, now we can also start talking about damage. So the other way that we increase our damage is by getting lots of dexterity on our gear. So you'll notice that on most pieces I have dexterity. So my breastplate here, dex, gloves, dex, pants, dex, boots, I don't have any. Bow, dex, 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 dex. No dex here. You could have had dex here instead of max life, but I ended up not having that here. And then no dex. So having lots of dex, you can see I have like 2,400 dex. I also have dex gems here, though I would actually recommend not using dex gems unless you're doing speed farming. So while you're building up the character, if you're comfortable, you could use dex, but otherwise those life gems here are going to increase your health a lot. So right now I have like 31,000, but with the health setup and these I can get up to like 57,000. So it's a huge, huge difference with these. But if you want to go kind of push that limit of DPS, you go with these dex gems. So that does scale up our damage by another 238% there. And then we also have lots of multipliers. So for example, here I have the aspect of retribution, which actually double dips while mobs are staggered or both stunned and knocked down, which I just did a video on if you want to go check that out. So basically you get this 1.6 multiplier 2 times, which is really nice. And then I also have intercom here, or you could use elements as well. Both of these are just going to give us another multiplier. And then I also have noxious, so this gives us a 45% multiplier when they're frozen. And then on my boots, I also have a 20% multiplier here from concussive. So there are lots of multipliers, and what you'll notice is pretty much all these multipliers require us to have some sort of crowd control effect on them. So for example, here the enemies have to be stunned or knocked down. Here they've got to be dazed. Here they got to be frozen. And then also we have things like frigid finesse, which gives us a huge multiplier when they're frozen. So frigid finesse is the #1 thing that you want on your amulet. And then after that, exploit, deadly venom, lucky hit chance, or dex percent are all good things to have. But the #1 thing that you want to make sure that you get on your amulet is frigid finesse. Now, in order to get all of this damage from our frigid finesse and our stuns and our dazes and things like that, we do need to have some tempers on our gear that are going to help us out. So on our defensive pieces, so for example my breastplate here, you can see that I have the chance to freeze, and then on my gloves I have another chance to freeze, and then on my pants I have a chance to stun, and on my boots I have a chance to slow. Now ideally I'd actually rather this just be a chance to stun, but I ran out of tempers and it didn't quite hit, so it is what it is. And this is going to help us just CC everything very fast, and then we can use shared misery. and this can spread that to everything else. So for example, if I just hit this one enemy, you can see everything gets frozen, stunned, dazed, etc. almost instantly because we're hitting so incredibly fast. So we can just freeze everything and be really, really safe. And then we also need to scale up our damage by getting lots of crowd control. So you'll notice on our tempers that pretty much all of my things that I can temper crowd control on, I do. So here I have 176% damage to crowd controlled enemies. Here I have 79%. Here I've got another 110%, another 91%, 91%, 71%. Basically, if you don't get this temper on your item, it's pretty much bricked, and go get a new one. And also my gloves, I also have it on. And the reason why we need that is because this build is using close quarters combat. Close quarters combat, what it does is you have to use both a marksman and a cutthroat skill. So you need two. So puncture is a marksman skill, and flurry is a cutthroat skill. So by using both of those, each one gives us a 15% attack speed for 8 seconds. And then while you have both of those attack speed bonuses active, then you deal increased damage equal to 10% multiplicative of your damage versus crowd-controlled enemies. So right now my current damage bonus is 101%, and that is because I currently have a crowd control damage of 1007%. So 10% of this is about 101%. So basically I get double damage because of close quarters combat. And that is really important that we always keep this buff up. And it's really easy to do with puncture and flurry, because as we're just attacking here, we should always be keeping that attack speed bonus up by attacking with flurry every 3 seconds. Now, you can also get close quarters combat up using like shadow step or dash, but I find that because these have cooldowns, it's a little bit harder to do, so this just makes it really easy to do that. Now, let's talk about the skills a little bit here. So the skills, there's a few things to know about. So we've talked about puncture. This gives us a way to put vulnerable on our enemies, as well as gives us a little bit more energy, as well as slowing the enemies. But this synergizes really nice with Flurry, because Flurry, we take the improved Flurry node here, which makes it so that if Flurry hits any vulnerable enemies, it will make all the other enemies hit by that cast vulnerable for 3 seconds. So this gives us a way to spread the vulnerable from puncture using Flurry. So for example, if I hit to make that vulnerable, and then I Flurry, now everything else is vulnerable here. So that is really nice synergy there. And then we have Shadow Imbuement. Shadow Imbuement makes us do 12% more non-physical damage. So this is just a really nice thing to use with Flurry. So as I activate that, do that. Now these have Shadow Imbue on them, and they're going to take more poison damage. And then Dash is mainly just for mobility. It's just for getting around the map fast there, or get us into or out of danger. And then Shadow Step is really important for breaking crowd control. So if you get stunned and things like that, you use that and it gets you out of there, makes you go unstoppable, and you get to safety. And then Caltrops is a huge damage multiplier. Caltrops has a few things to know about it though that is not super obvious here, but as you see here, the main thing is it says enemies and Caltrops take 10% increased damage from you, increased by 5% each second, up to 76%. And the reason it goes up to 76% is because it currently lasts 13 seconds, as you can see on the tooltip here. So 13 times 5, that is 65, plus the 10 gives us 75, or it's a rounding thing, so basically about 76%. And to get this duration up, what we do is we temper it onto our weapons. So here you can see on my weapon here, I have Caltrops Duration as my 5th affix there, or that second temper. And that increases the duration, which increases the maximum amount of increased damage that you can get from Caltrops. So while you're fighting, especially bosses, you want to keep them in Caltrops, because what will happen is that you will put Caltrops down, and now this damage multiplier is increasing over time. And they'll be taking 5% more damage, 5% more damage, etc., etc. Now, if I throw down another Caltrops, then when it reaches the maximum 76%, it's going to stay at 76%. So as long as they stay in Caltrops now, they're going to keep taking that 76% more damage. If they leave Caltrops for even just a moment, then it's going to reset back to 0% and you have to start all over again. So this is really important that you keep this up. And what you can do is you can take Caltrop size to make this easier to keep them inside, and I generally use this for things like speed farming. But that being said, I have a second dagger here that has Caltrops duration as well, and that Caltrops duration now you can see is 18 seconds, so now it can maximum go up to 98%. And this can give you an even bigger multiplier. So for things like pit pushing or doing like tormented bosses where you really want to get this duration as high as possible to get as much damage as possible, this is really key. And then an alternative skill that I use in some of the builds is Poison Trap. So instead of using Dash, I would take Poison Trap, and I may switch a couple points somewhere to get into Subverting Poison Trap, and this is just going to give us another 10% multiplier to our poison damage. And on our chest, we do take this +4 to Dark Shroud, because that is going to synergize really nicely with Umbrus. As you can see, this gives us a chance to generate these shrouds that you see around me. So whenever I attack with a marksman skill, that'd be Puncture, then I have a chance to generate a Dark Shroud Shadow. And Dark Shroud is our #1 defensive thing. So as you can see here, what this does is it gives us, I have 9 points into it, 4 plus the 5, gives us 11.2% damage reduction per active shadow. And so with 5 of them, 5 times 11.2 would be 56% damage reduction, which is really huge. And we actually want to get this even higher if possible. So on your chest, if you can get a greater affix Dark Shroud, that'd be preferable. They're really expensive though. I haven't gotten one. And then try and get as many Masterwork procs on them. All right, so let's look at the planner here. And I'm going to talk about just a couple things on mainly the starter build and then the optimized build, and tell you about kind of the differences here so you can choose which one you want to start with here. If you're just kind of getting started with the build, I would recommend the starter build. This is going to be just really easy to play. You don't really have to worry about a whole lot. You can kind of just run around, hit stuff, and be just fine. The optimized setup is a little bit harder to gear up, as well as a little bit harder to play optimally. So it's up to you which one you're more comfortable with. If you're more experienced, you might want to go with the optimized build to begin with, but it's up to you. So the Andy starter build, if we take a look at it here, there's a few things to point out. So in order to max out your armor, you do need 1 armor temper roll, as you can see on my pants here. It doesn't have to be on the pants, it could be on other pieces, but you just need that armor temper roll. And then you also need 1 armor roll somewhere, and that'll get you to your max armor cap. And then you do need just 1 all resist roll here. So you can see on my pants, I have the all resist roll, and that'll get you to your maximum resist cap of 70%. And then you just need the 1 attack speed roll somewhere. So for example here, I have it on the gloves, but again, it could be on the rings and things like that. Okay. And then on the Paragon here, the Paragon setup is different between the starter and the optimized one, because the optimized one as you'll see here, requires a little bit more gearing to use fully. Okay. And also, one of the other main things is that on here, I do use exploit, because exploit is going to just allow us to put vulnerable on everything very easily, and I don't have to worry about trying to get my flurry to spread the puncture as much. Again, just kind of just an ease of use thing. And I do take elements on here because this is just going to work for you automatically. Now, the specialized or the optimized one here does use a different board, so I don't take exploit, but I do take instead, I have ambush, so this is going to give us 10% more damage from when an enemy's in our trap. And then the nice thing about the optimized board is it does allow us an extra glyph slot as well, so we end up with getting chip, which is going to give us another 10% damage multiplier here. And this also gives us actually a little bit more health on this board as well. So overall, this optimized board, it is better, though the thing about it is in order to use it, the armor requirements are a little bit harder to meet. So on here, you can do this actually in a couple ways. So the optimized way of doing it is getting a greater affix roll on your armor roll, and then also getting one masterwork proc on it. So you can see here, that would suffice. And then you also need to level it up to 12 out of 12 in order to get that max armor cap. You can actually do this setup by just doing the starter setup as well, which is why it transitions nicely. So just having the armor roll with the temper armor will also get you there. And then the other thing, though, is that the resists are a little bit harder to cap on here. So you'll need to get on your rings, you'll need to get the 10% cold implicit that you see there. So 10% cold, and you need to get at least one. If you have one of them, you're okay. If you have two, you're better. But if you only have one, then you will need to take these 2 extra cold resist rolls here. But if you have 2 of them, then you don't need those, and you can get a little bit more health, which is nice as well. And then the same things apply. You still need the all resist roll, and you still need the attack speed roll as well. Yeah. But if you're good with those, then I'd actually recommend go with the optimized setup. And the other thing is that on here I do take intercom, so this is going to require you to stand still in order to like fully optimize your damage. And this is really nice, especially versus bosses. But if you don't want to have to worry about standing still, just go with elements. And then another thing that I wanted to mention is actually about pestilent points and bursting venoms. Pestilent points, what this does is every third cast of puncture, poison imbues are daggers. So as you see here, you can see that those green daggers that get shot out there every now and then. So what that's doing is it's actually activating one of our legendary nodes here. So we take the Eldritch Bounty legendary node, and when you use an imbuement, you get 20% increased damage as well as some increased max resist for that element. So here we can see that as I attack here, then it gives us this increased poison resist and damage. And pestilent points, it actually synergizes really nice with bursting venoms. Because bursting venoms, what it does is it gives poison imbue skills a chance to spawn a puddle. And that puddle does some damage, and it also has a chance of proccing Andariel's Visage. So this can give us even more damage. So if I start attacking, we can spawn that bursting venoms, and you can see that I got another proc there even after I stopped attacking. And that can be because of the pestilent points, poison imbue has a chance, but also the bursting venoms has a chance as well. Alright, so I know that was a lot of information, guys. Hopefully you guys feel more confident about making this build and understanding how it works. In the future, I'm planning on doing some more parts to go over specifics about some different setups to help you guys do better when it comes to killing the pit bosses or tormented bosses or speed running, things like that. If that's something you guys want, let me know down in the comments below, or if there's anything confusing about the guide, let me know and I'll try to clarify. If you guys want more videos about this topic, make sure to hit subscribe so you get those notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.